Record. Okay, and I have 3 squares on my computer on Zoom that actually will show me their faces. So you are going to have to smile a lot and act like you're super interested, because more than half the people are not on here, at least not showing themselves off. So great to see all of you, Aaron and Lauren and Jen and Karen and Angelin. And
There's a smile.
There's a little one. Hi. Awesome. All right, I'm going to pray for us and we'll get started. Thanks, Father. We are truly grateful. You give us an evening to hang out together and to discuss this section of your word, to celebrate Christmas and Advent being done, but Christmas season now. And we ask that you help us to learn a little bit today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, normal caveat as always, even though everybody probably knows it at this point, but what we do at Tuesday School is try to get you out of the rut that you're in when it comes to reading the Bible and thinking about things, and widen the box as much as we can. Maybe sometimes scare you a lot, make you think I'm a heretic, something like that, and then we'll jump back in. But usually I try to come up with something that you probably haven't thought a lot about before from basic Bible passages that you have read many times, I'm guessing. So here we go. We're going to be talking about the last section in Matthew chapter 2, well, for the Advent part, the Christmas part. So that's the second part of that. But I have some questions before we get there. But I only have a few people on here, so you're really going to have to help me out with this. Let's see this. Anybody taken like classes in fighting, some kind of fighting, boxing, wrestling, karate, military, I don't know what, super spy, FBI? Okay, I've got one person.
I did.
All right, I heard somebody else. That's
I
2.
did as well.
Okay, that's 3. Good. All right. So some people have taken some kind of classes, self-defense of some kind. You know what it means to actually wrestle with someone or get them off of you, or know how to do something cool there. All right. How many of you have gotten in a legit fight? Like something like punches were actually thrown, and like not just practice, but all the way down to 6 years old is okay. Legit fight. Anyone? Kind of, a little bit. All right, yeah. Does it count as a legit fight? I don't know. Yeah, I punched my friend in the same sandbox when I was little. Was that a fight? I don't know. He hit me first. It ended quickly, but you know.
You're a snowballed a kid today. Does that count?
You snowballed a kid today?
Yeah.
Was there ice in? That's the question.
No, but it was in the face.
That doesn't.
And it was like wet and heavy because it was.
All right.
It was wet.
Did they attack
Deserved
you?
it.
Did they attack you back?
No. Started crying and went inside.
Oh, okay. So were they under the age of 7?
Yes. Wait. I don't know. How old is Leo? Do you know?
Oh, you hit Leo in the face with nice job.
Yes.
Leo win. Good job. He probably deserved it, let's be honest. All right. Sorry, Greg and Lena, if you're listening to live for guys. Okay. All right. Now let's ask questions about guns. How many of you have shot a gun?
I have.
All right. That looks like just about everybody. Anthony Woods is on there.
God bless America.
That's right. America, we're here for it. Yep. All right. How many of you would say that you are any kind of a peacemaker?
I would say so.
Okay. 2, 3. Good. Okay. So 3 or 4 trying to be a peacemaker. Yeah, you don't know to what level it is, and that's what we're going to discuss. All right. So let me ask you this. Somebody breaks into your home and takes your child. Okay. This is probably not good because I'm looking around and I know that all of you have children, except for Davin, that I'm not aware of yet anyway. So
He's got.
he might have some. There's but all of you have children. It's horrible to even think about, I know for a sec, but like if someone came and kidnapped your child, to what extent would you go to make sure that person got what was coming to them? We'll just say that. Right?
I would probably kill him.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'll be
exactly,
honest.
right? Yes. Aren't we all thinking the same thing there? Right? All right, wait, let's back up. Let's back up. You all watch movies, right? Okay. So, how many of you watch tearjerkers?
Yeah.
Anybody? A few people like tearjerkers. I can't stand them. Okay. Never cried in a single movie until I started having children. Okay. Then, for some reason, my whole, like, who I am started to change. So, like, Armageddon. Okay. You guys seen Armageddon? Ben Affleck talking with Bruce Willis, right? He's not even his son, for crying out loud. And I'm just bawling, just crying during this show. That's just one of them. Frequency. Dennis Quaid and Jim Caviezel, right? Back and forth across time. And they're having this conversation. I'm just crying. Field of Dreams. When he meets his dad says, "You want to have a catch?" Oh my gosh, right? Like, if the goosebumps are not happening at that point, good grief, even like Finding Nemo, this little poor fin gimp fish can't find his dad, and then they finally meet, and right? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. That's what grabs hold of me. Those are those moments where I'm just crying the whole time. So when I say somebody comes into my home and takes my child with them, you would probably think along with me how terrible of a Liam Neeson character you would be in this movie production, right? You would go all Liam Neeson on, right? You'd be talking on the phone and you'd be saying, "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want," right? Whatever it is. You're looking for ransom. I can tell you I don't have any money. You guys know where I'm talking? You guys have seen this movie, please? I know Jen hasn't because she doesn't watch any movies. I'm trying to change that in her life. But I have a particular set of skills, Old Testament hermeneutics and theology, and I will find you and take my son back, right? Whatever it is, right? Skills that make me a nightmare for people like you, if you remember how it all goes. If you let my son go now, that'll be the end of it. I'm not going to look for you. I'm not going to pursue you. But if you don't, I will look for you. I will find you and I will kill you, right? We're all going to go, all of us. That's what parents do. We're going to destroy whoever this is. Absolutely, we're going to destroy that person. So, my point here is sons, daughters, children, super special. Okay? Intimacy between a father and a son. Okay, well, my other son is not the one that's on here right now, of course. Yeah. Yeah, that was good. That was a good depressed look. Thank you. All right. He knows it's not true. All right. So here's the key part of all this, because we got to get into the Bible at some point, right? God, I know you're going to be surprised by this. God has a son, right? I mean, it is about a Christmas story, right? So God has this son, and the son is off to this rocky start, really bad beginning. Not the way that I would care for my son if I had a son. God has the means to take care of his son in any way he wants. He could lavish all the love he wants on him. He could spoil him rotten. He could give him assistance that would jump at everything they said. I mean, he could really take care of his son. But things are not good for this son for most of his life. Things are pretty bad. Sometimes the son obeys. Sometimes the son doesn't. Right? Sometimes he's safe at home. Other times he gets beat up by bullies. Sometimes he's got enough food to eat. Other times he's starving to death. Sometimes snakes come and attack him. Okay? This is all the story that you know about God's son, right? One time he gets a plague. It's really bad, terrible plague. He's made a slave for a long time, which is a problem. He's more than once picks up some pretty nasty diseases because he's been sleeping around, this son. And at one point, God even kicks him out of his house. This is the story that you all know. A little tough love going on there. I don't know if you've had a son or a daughter like this that you've had to have some tough love on. who's been doing all those crazy things, and you got to push him out of the house, and because you want to take care of maybe your other children or something like that. It's not that you don't love that kid. You do. You love him intensely. You cry over that kid, but you can't let him back into the house. So here's God's son. God's son is a stinking mess in the Bible. All right. So I'm hoping your mind is widening a little bit right now as you think about who God's son is at this point. So much so that that's you. You're that son as a mess. Yeah. No question about that. I'm sure that's right. All right. So much so, God loves this son so much, and he's going through all of these different things that he finds out that his son is turned into a slave, and he pretty much decides to go all Liam Neeson on those. Okay. He's nice about it at first. He sends a messenger to tell this slave master, to tell this person who has kidnapped him, you better let my son go. And so he says these famous words that maybe you know. Israel is my firstborn son. Remember these words in Exodus? Israel is my firstborn son. And he follows up with, let my son go so that he can worship me in the desert. All right. So were you guys following me with this? With this little allegory that I've created? Or were you completely, like when I started saying that his son was sleeping around, and I started saying that his son gets bullied and his son's doing all these terrible things, right? Hopefully your mind was going somewhere different when I was saying all that stuff. But now you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Israel's son. Yes? Who is Israel's son?
Israel.
Sorry. Who is God's son? Now it should be pretty easy for you to figure out who's God's son. All right.
Graham.
Israel. What'd you say? I didn't hear what you said.
I said France.
France. Good job. Israel. Well done. All right. So if the enemy in Exodus refuses to let his son go, it says that he's going to kill their firstborn son. So you've kidnapped my firstborn son. I'm going to take out your firstborn son. That's the deal. If you don't let them go, I'm going to take out your firstborn. So God is not messing around. He's definitely the Liam Neeson character in this. He's going to do what needs to happen. In fact, he's going to release the Avenger of Death, quite literally, on this kidnapper in the Old Testament, and wreaks havoc with them. So Hosea the prophet emphasizes these poor choices of God's son, okay, who's Israel, these poor choices that Israel makes, and he remembers that God loves him even still. So Israel's making all these choices, all these terrible things. God's son is making all these terrible choices. God's ticked at them, really angry at them, but really angry at the people who are messing with them, and still loves his son more than anything. And that's when we get that verse in Hosea, very well-known verse. When Israel was a child, then I loved him, and I called him out. I called my son out of Egypt. Now that's famous, not because you know Hosea, because no one knows Hosea, but because it's quoted in the New Testament. All right, everyone following my train of thought so far? Because we're about to get into the text in just a second. We're going to get into the actual New Testament text. So this Hosea passage is this incredibly pivotal moment in the life of God's son. It's a moment he's going to look back on all of his life. It's when God, with his overwhelming chesed, all right, everybody practice that one. I know you all have your mics on, so that's okay. Chesed, to say it with that little, like when you say Hanukkah. Chesed. Okay, it's chesed. It's this covenantal mercy, this grace, this love, kindness. It's sometimes translated. This is what he has for his son, despite all of these things. And so Hosea remembers it and remembers how God's sons act, and God frees him from his slavery. So time's going to continue. Got to give our whole Old Testament section before we get there. Time continues. God's son doesn't mature the way they're supposed to. God locks him out of the house. This is what's happening in the Old Testament. He's locking him out of the house, and he goes to Egypt for a warm bed again. All right. So there's a lot of escapes to Egypt. First time in the Exodus, right? But it keeps happening. Just as he did in Genesis, for the grain. He's going to keep doing this. And he goes to Babylon. He gets removed from the world that he's in. But eventually God frees him from their problems, from their exile, from all their pain and stuff, returns him to the presence. But you know the story at the end of the Old Testament is there's still nothing has ever gotten the way it's supposed to be. Nothing's back. There's no return. There's no joy. There's nothing's ever the same. And then we get these Babylonian astrology people that decide that they're going to investigate this phenomenon in the heavens. They're going to look for a new kind of creation, a new son of God. All right, so all through the Old Testament, Israel is called the son of God. Very key part. If you're not catching that, this is really important. Israel is the son of God. Now they find out that there is another son of God that they're supposed to look for, and they travel for weeks to see how God's son is changed. And with no help from Herod, you remember that was from last time that we talked together, with no help from Herod, they end up finding this child, a son, wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. They worship him. They don't tell Herod where he is. All that was last time that we talked about this. And that's where our story picks up. All that background was just to get you to Matthew chapter 2, verse 13. So if you got a Bible, this is where you pull it out. All right, Matthew 2:13 and following. And I want you to hear this text. So I know it's hard to listen to a whole text of the Bible sometimes, but just try to focus, try to keep it going. What we've done so far in Matthew is we've seen a genealogy, super boring genealogy, which hopefully I showed you wasn't boring at all, that all these kings were really important, right? And then what was the second part in Matthew? Does anybody remember? This is like a month ago now. I can't remember it. Well, the third part was the Magi coming to Herod. I know that. That's in chapter 2.
Joseph's story.
The Joseph story. Oh, yeah. How God was going to work with Joseph and Mary, and how all had to jump through all the hurdles to get there. That's right. All right. So now the wise men have come. We found out that there's not 3 wise men. Right? We found out that they're not we 3 kings of Orient. None of that stuff's accurate, right? They're just these kingmaker, these magi from the time of Zoroastrianism and things like that. They've come to see the new king, and they found him, and that's where we pick up in verse 13. All right, who's got a Bible who wants to read it so I don't have to sit and read it the whole time? Because you're going to hear my voice 98% of the time here today. So you got one with them? Verse 13 to the end of the chapter. Go ahead. Travis, you're the man.
When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity, who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through a prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted, because they are no more. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. So he got up, took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in the dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets. He will be called a Nazarene.
All right. Okay. So now we're going to take this apart. Verse 13. Where does he go? Anybody? Where does he go?
Egypt.
Egypt. Thank you. This is very important because I want you to look back to this Old Testament. This is all I'm doing today. I want you to see that the older story is being redone. Matthew is well aware of all of this old history. And so he is telling you a story that is shaped like that old history. That's what the goal here is. So he is coming out of Egypt, or he's going into Egypt to be protected from these anti-God forces. So this is what they're trying to do. And in the Old Testament, that's the same way, right? They're starving to death. They have to escape to Egypt to get in there. Okay. And they're beaten down by Assyria. They escape to Egypt. Egypt is a place that you constantly escape to, but then it becomes a problem for them. That's part of the thing that always happens. So now Jesus is escaping out of Egypt. He escapes to Egypt out of fear for Herod. And with good cause, right? Remember who Herod is, right? Herod is the king of the Jews. And he's the guy who kills his own family because he was worried that they would have a takeover plot. He's the guy who killed on the day of his own death. He had everybody marked out. He had people in the community planned to be killed on the day he was killed so that there would be mourning on the day of his death. And he knew nobody would be crying for him. So he killed a bunch of other people so they would actually be crying. So yeah, it makes sense that people are going to be worried about this guy, that you'd want to escape this kind of guy. And Herod's upset. He's been tricked by the wise men. They don't come back. And now he's really ticked. He's not going to take any chances. So what does he decide to do? What's Herod's plan?
Kill the babies.
That's right. Kill all the babies. That's the plan. All the kids under 2 years old, he's going to kill. Now, I hope this sounds eerily familiar to you. Okay, this is not the first time that this has happened in the history of the Bible. I don't know how many times it's happened in the history, but in the history of the Bible, it's very, very normal. That's what happened in Egypt. That's how remember, Moses is rescued. They saw that he was good. They hid him away. That was the whole thing. The Pharaoh was going around killing everyone. They were worried that a usurper would take the throne. And if you read other stories in the Exodus story, you'll see that that's what the Pharaoh was worried about then too. Okay, he wanted to make sure that because there was a sign that somebody would come and take over his throne, and he wouldn't have that. So in Matthew, the wise men trick Herod. In the Exodus story, the midwives trick the Pharaoh, both so that the child somehow survives. Okay. All right. So you're supposed to see, if this isn't very clear, Herod and Pharaoh is the same character. He's telling you the story of Pharaoh again through this new person, Herod. Both pretty foolish, both threatened by the Son of God, right? Both in a position that they would do whatever they can to destroy this son. So the narrative's a little strange. Look at this just because there's this thing going on in verse 15. So if you're reading verse 14, you just skip right to verse 16. So he got up, he took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt. When Herod realized that he'd been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem, his vicinity, etc. There's this little piece in 15 that kind of where he stayed until the death. How are people able to get in when I'm Facebook Live? Am I still? I am. There. Okay. Apparently you can call. Through Facebook Live. I had no idea. All right. So anyway, verse 15 is this little where he stayed until the death of Herod, and so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt called my son. Just this little parenthetical thing. Here's the storyline, and here's the storyline. In the middle, it says they stayed till the end. Starts here and continues here. So they decide to stay in Egypt. Herod's going on this rampage, kills everyone in the region. You don't need to think about that being millions of kids. It may have been dozens of kids. We don't have any idea. Doesn't matter. I mean, dozens of kids or millions of kids, both are really horrendously horrible, right? But the point is that you're supposed to see him as a killer, just like Pharaoh was before. So Herod takes Israel's children to protect his throne, to protect his rights, to protect his independence. you could probably, this would be a great place in a sermon for me to wax eloquently about how we still do the same thing with, instead of, I mean, how many, I don't even know the numbers. I think every 5 minutes in the United States, a dozen children are killed from abortion, like those kinds of things. We may have some different politics here, and that's okay. I love you all. But to me, that's a tragedy, a huge tragedy as to what's happening. But all right. The point of Matthew, though, is that we see Herod as Pharaoh. That's what we're trying to see. But the connection is more vivid and important than we see. He doesn't quote from Exodus. We've already seen him talking about Exodus. We know he's doing the Exodus connection, but he's going to pull in Jeremiah here. Okay, that's that little verse about Ramah that we just read. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. What is this talking about? Anyone? You guys know anything about Ramah? Good, I can actually use this. Let's see, pedagogically correct here. We got this, we got this, we got this, right? We got Egypt down here. This is where they've gone to be protected from. You've got Europe up here. Okay, you got Persia way over here. Just to give you an outline, this is Israel. Okay, here, right around here is Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Ramah. Okay, they're about 6 miles away from each other. 6 miles between here and 6 miles between here. And this Ramah is a place that the exiles were marched through. It's very well known for all of them. Okay, so the exiles, that is, remember Assyria is like this empire over here. Assyria is moving forward. Okay, it'll eventually become the Babylonian Empire because they'll beat up on Assyria and get rid of them. The Assyrian Empire will become the Babylonian Empire. Then it'll become the Greek Empire, right, under Alexander the Great. Then it'll become the Roman Empire. That's all a long ways away from them. Okay, that's where they're at right now in our text, the Roman Emperor, Caesar Augustus, all that stuff. Okay, but right now we're back here with the Assyrian Babylonian Empire. They're coming and they're taking these people to Assyria. They're pulling people out of Judah and traveling through Ramah. And so it says, Rachel is crying for her children. What does that mean? What is happening at this time? This is, I'll say it in very clear but still metaphorical terms. This is the death of Israel.
This is Rachel, like Abraham's wife, Rachel.
This is almost, just go back to your memory here, not Abraham's wife. Who's Rachel's wife? Who's Rachel the wife of?
Jacob.
Jacob.
Isaac.
Right.
Jacob.
One of those patriarchal people, right? Yeah. Jacob, who is Israel. Jacob's name is Israel. Rachel is his wife. So Rachel is crying for her children because they are dead. Death. How many of you seen Dark Knight Rising? Bane, Tom Hardy, that one, right? Okay, you remember there's a felon he gets out of prison and he's now the judge, and he is sentencing Gordon, Commissioner Gordon, and he asks him what he wants. Does he want to be killed, death, or exile? I was hoping Jeremy Hackenberg would be on here today, but he's conveniently absent because he'd have been just like, oh, I'm in now. Talk to me about this. Batman is his hero. Okay, is it death or is it going to be exile? And what exile meant was that they were going to, I think he had to walk over the lake and it was starting to freeze, but it wasn't totally frozen, and they had to walk and they would certainly die. Those of you who remember the show, it's been a long time since I saw it. But that was the plan, right? And so he chooses, Commissioner Gordon brilliantly chooses death. And the felon bangs the gavel and says, death by exile. All right, so he cheats him and exiles him instead. Think about that terminology when it comes to the Old Testament. Okay, death by exile. Death by exile. This idea is missed so much in the Old Testament that when God says that they will be killed, usually what he's talking about is they will be exiled. That's what's happening. So think back to your Genesis class. Those of you who were around when I was teaching through Genesis. Okay. And God says, if you eat of this tree, you will surely die, right? And then they eat of the tree, and what happens?
They don't die.
They don't die. What
They
does
get-
happen to them, though?
They get
They
exiled.
They get exiled. Because Adam is Israel, right? He's a symbol for mankind represented by Israel, a kingdom of priests for all mankind. So when he dies, it means that he is pushed out of the land. If I had my whole thing here again, he gets exiled into Assyria, outside of the favorable presence of God, which is what the temple was. I don't know what a temple looks like. It certainly didn't have a cross on it, but you get the idea there. Okay. So they no longer have the sanctuary of God. They're no longer in the presence of God. They get exiled. And this is not just what happens to Adam being kicked out. This is what happens to Israel in general under Assyria. They get kicked out, and now they're in exile. And this language is going to show up all throughout the prophets, this death kind of thing, this death by exile. Think about the dry bones in Ezekiel, right? That's death. Are they really dead? No, they're in exile. And when did the dry bones live? What's the promise is that the dry bones are going to live? What does that mean? That they're going to come back to life? Not literally come back to life, but that they will once again inherit the land. Israel will be reconstituted. All of this will come back again. That's the hope. So when Cyrus, who they call their Messiah, right? Follow the connections here. Cyrus is the great king. He's the one who lets everybody go back out of exile, back to the sanctuary of God, so that they'll rebuild the temple. They'll rebuild this connection with God again. So back to Ramah, 6 miles north. This is where they're all going. This is where the invaders, and Rachel, this is where the invaders will track these exiles through. Rachel will be crying for her children because they are no more. It's a metaphor for death. So Matthew is wrapping this all together. He's taking the Pharaoh story, killing the children under 2, with the destruction of Israel in the exile, into this one grand story, rewriting this grand story about a king who's going to stop at nothing to make sure a new king doesn't rise. So when I say these guys are literary geniuses every single week, I'm not kidding here. They grabbed all this Old Testament history and they want you to hear this new story, and they know that you, rather their readers, Matthew's readers, know this history so well that you're going to start making all these connections. You're just going to be smiling throughout the story. I see what's happening here. Right? He's a Pharaoh. I got you. Herod's the Pharaoh here, trying to take out the new son of God. I see what you're doing here, Matthew. Very wise. Okay, God, of course, the Holy Spirit divinely putting all of this stuff together. So the Son of God, Israel, is killed horribly in the early parts of Exodus by an anti-God king. Right? That's what happens there. The Son of God is killed horribly in the exile by an anti-God king, Nebuchadnezzar, etc. And now Matthew is wrapping up the story and saying, we've got another anti-God king ready to kill the Son of God. Okay, so the same story is happening. What does God do? What does God do to Egypt? What does God do to Babylon / Assyria when these anti-God kings take out his son? Okay, Liam Neeson. Okay, I will find you and I will kill you. Okay, it's from Taken, those of you who've come on recently. Okay, that's what God does every single time. This is what he's doing. And you can hear on the other end of the line, right, the Pharaoh or the king saying, good luck, right? If you know the movie reference. You're with me. If you don't, you're just like, please get to the Bible, for crying out loud. Stop with the movie stuff. All right. So, and God says, oh, good luck. Yeah. And what does he do? He jumps off a bridge, punches through through the window of the car. Right? I mean, doing all these insane things and takes them out. So Pharaoh has his son. He's going to get him back. Babylon has his son. He's going to get him back. He destroys Pharaoh in a sea. He destroys Babylon. Well, Assyria with Babylon. They keep getting killed. They keep being destroyed. Okay. And Ezekiel is full of all these woes, right? Woe to all these places that do these terrible things that bully my child. Tyre, woe to Egypt, woe to Babylon, woe to Seir, woe to Ammon, Moab, Edom, right? All these different things. Woe to each of these things. And if you're looking at my notes at this point, it says like woe, W-H-O-A. And I didn't catch that till today. Somebody brought it up. I don't know why. It's not horses. It's woe, W-O-E, for crying out loud. I'm sorry if you're looking at it. I just write what I'm thinking in my head and it didn't come out right. Okay. So Isaiah said, Babylon has fallen, right? Woe to Babylon the Great. They have fallen. All the images of gods lie shattered on the ground. Jeremiah speaks about Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, like the neck of the nations is being crushed under them. God, my point here is God deals with the people who hurt his son. Every time in history, if you mess with his son, you are in deep trouble, which is why the story in Matthew is so freaking amazing to me. I mean, for so many reasons, it's amazing. But if you follow this line of thinking throughout the Old Testament, there is an obvious conclusion to this story, right? They've messed with the Son of God, and people pay when that happens. There's going to be warpath. So I'm expecting Liam Neeson from God in this story. This is how Matthew chapter 2 should end. Herod is on a rampage, killing all the kids, trying to kill the Son of God. Oh, no. God is going to come down hard on this. So you hurt my boy. I'm coming after you. That's God. That's God's voice. But something's changed here in this story, which we don't often notice because we don't look through the Old Testament lens. Something seems to change. God's not going to react in violence this time. In fact, God's going to take his son, hide him away in Egypt, the place that he crushed, this place that he destroyed. He's going to hide him there. He's going to bring people from Babylon, from Persia, from the east, to come find this child and worship him. This is how the story is ending in this particular case. And while God thwarts Herod's plans to kill the child, right, doesn't let him kill the child, he doesn't attack Herod. We just have this little verse. After Herod died, the angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. They're just waiting. God doesn't do anything to Herod. We're just waiting for him to die. And once he dies, get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who are trying to take the child's life are dead. Avoid him? Like, this is God's plan now? Avoid the king? All throughout the Old Testament, it's never avoid the king. It's always crush the king, destroy him completely. Take the sea and drown everybody who's attacking you. Right? So it's really bad. And this one, nope. Completely opposite. God is acting completely different than he's ever acted before. And then this child starts to grow up. And you know the story because it's shown in all the Gospels. His son grows in favor of God and with God and man. Right? And he matures. He understands his mission. He follows what seems to be a ridiculous path. One that no one really can comprehend exactly what he's going through. And the path is, for God, is this path where not the enemy ends up getting trounced, but the son does. It's the strangest reversal of the story you'd ever see. The one who deserves to be destroyed, Herod, Rome, everybody who's put him into this situation, now it's the son. So God's come to Mary to explain. He's come to Joseph, giving him a reason to stick around. That's what we talked about earlier. He comes again to warn them against Herod. He's done everything to keep his child alive to make sure it happens. Now this grown child is walking this path to Jerusalem where they're going to capture him. They're going to beat him. They're going to hit him with a club, whip him, take leather straps designed with glass and rocks and things like that to open up his back to the bone. They're going to pin nails in him. They're going to stick a crown of thorns on his head. And they're going to stick a spear in his side. And they're going to lift him up on this cross. That's what we'd expect him to do to the enemy. Right? That's the Liam Neeson that I would know. He will destroy the enemy. Put the chief priest there. That makes sense. Put the Caesar Augustus there. Put Herod there. Put Pontius Pilate there. I don't know. The only person who doesn't deserve to be there for sure is the one that gets put there, which I know you know that story. But if you think about it with all this Old Testament stuff, here's Jesus hanging on the cross, right? God in the flesh, and saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? So, oh yeah, I'm almost finished, so that's great. I got 30 minutes for discussion. Why have you forsaken me? Why have you exiled me? Why have you cast me out? Why have you not saved me? Why am I not in the pleasurable presence of God? Right? Why am I being allowed to die or to be exiled? That's what he's saying on the cross right here. Why have you exiled me? And then his world goes black. And the family of the Caesar Augustus, who put him there, gains access to the throne of grace. And the family of Herod gains access to through the curtain to the grace of God. And the families in Egypt and Babylon and all these places, everyone that's destroyed the Son of God for thousands of years now gains access to God in this cool new way. Because the sin of Rome, Israel, Babylon, Egypt were all taken out on the Son of God, which I think is the greatest Christmas story ever that we just seem to miss sometimes, or at least maybe I do. All right, so what does that mean for us? Now we've got 15 or so minutes, maybe even longer, 30 he just said, but as long as we want. I want to talk this through. I mean, I expected there to be 30 people like usual, but so if somebody's going to have to talk, I hope everyone's going to start disappearing from me. I'm sure, yep, there goes Davin. Yep, see, good call. I don't want to talk this through. All right, so what does this mean for us? I started off this question, right? What would you do if your children are taken? Right? I don't know who you are, but I will find you and I will kill you. And that's what all of us, that's all of our inclination, I would think. And yet, God's inclination, as seen through Jesus, is exactly the opposite, which is mind-boggling to me. I can't even think like this. As an American, and I'm huge love for America, huge patriot. I'm a big fan, right? I love our military. I love all that stuff. I can't say enough about that. That's not the point of this, but just to make sure I have this caveat in there that I definitely think all those things. What do we do with this? If we're supposed to be like God, and God decides in the perfect revelation of his son to allow his son to be exiled and die instead of everything else, what does this mean for us? Is retribution an option for us? What does it mean at Christmas time? Does it mean we can let other people win? We can certainly say that. We can let other people win. That's easy, I hope. I know it's not easy. Like we're still those people. Are you justified in punching somebody in the face if they take your kid? What about if they just punch you in the face? Like, I'm asking the question of pacifism versus violence, right? Which one do we choose in light of this larger story where God lets his son die instead of seek retribution on the enemy? Can you do that? Because I can't do that. I can't imagine doing that. Do we have to? Is that what we're called to by the story? This is your chance to talk. Otherwise, I just fill the space with more of my babble. Poor Laura, I can see her just sitting there in COVID hell. Oh. Oh yeah, and Jen's getting over not COVID, but some other misery from a month or so. Anybody else have any terrible diseases that? No, I don't know about it. What do we do? Are you a pacifist? Are you a warmonger? Are you somewhere in between? Have you ever thought about it before? Like my brother and dad, I have two Marines in my family, right? My dad is a Marine, my brother's a Marine. They had a conversation this Thanksgiving, in the house that I could not believe that we were having about this exact question. Right? What do we do? Because both of them are soldiers. They're Marines. They don't want to be called soldiers, but whatever. They're soldiers, right? And I think Lauren's we have soldiers, and on our group, we've got a bunch of people that are veterans and stuff like that, which is great. What do we do? Can we go to war? Where are you in this based on this, not just based on America, but now that you've thought through this text and what God does, what do you think?
Where's your exact question? What's the exact question you're asking?
What's the exact question? Are you a pacifist or a warmonger or somewhere in between?
Depends on the
Where?
situation.
Okay.
If somebody breaks in my house, I'm going to kill them and give them the opportunity to accept Christ as they die. If they try to kill my kid, yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. I think that seems reasonable in my own head. I'm sure it sounds reasonable in scripture, but it doesn't in my own head. Yep. Anybody else thought about this stuff before? Because I feel like you have to think about it before it happens, because otherwise you're going to just react. Right? This is what we call spiritual disciplines, right? Thinking through these ethical questions before we're forced to deal with them to get our mind going in the right direction. We still may respond poorly, but at least we've thought through it many times. We're like, okay, this is my plan. I will pull a gun, but I will shoot them in the foot, right? That's what my plan is. Okay? Whatever your plan is, I have no idea, but you make a plan ahead of time so that you come closer to accomplishing it. So we have a bunch of moms, one dad on here.
I think we're called to, as a default setting, be pretty nonviolent. That doesn't mean that we have to be pacifist and like totally get walked over. I like the more like non-conformist, nonviolent action sort of thing, as opposed to just being a total pacifist. But I think there's also room for some wisdom and carve outs and exceptions here and there potentially. I don't know. But I mean, the story from Matthew, the story from Hosea is that, I'm going to love you anyway, because even though you're terrible and have done all these awful things. And that's the story of the Bible, right? So.
Yeah. But how do you do that?
I mean, because I also think sometimes that, what's since you like movies, First Night with Sean Connery. Sometimes there's a peace only to be found on the other side of war.
Is that an accurate statement? Just because Sean Connery said it in his great Scottish brogue doesn't mean that it's a right statement.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to believe him always, no matter what he says. So, yep. Because that's Caesar Augustus, right? The Pax Romana was, hey, look at this place. It's peaceful. Yeah, that's because you destroyed everybody brutally and made sure that nobody could get to you. Of course it's peaceful now.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the legend of King Arthur was a just war more than anything. It's a myth and legend, not so much a brutal empire takeover of real life.
True.
But are we talking about Roman, or are we going to talk about, I'm a patriot too, but we have the American Empire that's pretty similar and done some pretty amazing things too. So,
Yep. Okay.
if you actually study poli-sci and history, we don't often fight for democracy. We more often fight for capitalism. So, in maintaining an economic dominance. When that coincides with democracy, great, and that's how we'll tell the story.
That's how we tell the story. Very good. Yep. Yeah. Poli-sci major. Yeah. Good job, Jace. All right. So would you chase down somebody and I don't know. All right. Let's stop because we don't have enough people to have a discussion, but I just want to make sure someone didn't have something they really wanted to say. Because I'm good just letting it hang and just making sure that we've thought through these issues a little bit. Travis, you look like you're going to say one more thing or 20 more things.
I took this class in college that was about, I don't know, some hippy dippy nonviolent class. I forget what the actual title of it was. But there was in Indianapolis, there's a center for something in nonviolence out at Eagle Creek Reservoir. Peace and nonviolence, I think is what it's called. So this professor took us there, and like they go through the whole like total nonviolent aspect, and they talk a story about how this guy went out into the jungles with the drug lords in South America, and you take a hop step backwards and put up your little peace triangle and say, stop, let's talk this through, and use your words, and you don't ever get physical. And at the time, and even still now, I think that sounds just absolutely ridiculous to a certain extent. But I do think as a general rule, perhaps we jump to violence and we shouldn't jump to violence right away. Maybe we should jump and try and talk through the situation. And maybe 9 times out of 10, if you're willing to actually make a sacrifice and say, well, what is it the person wants? What do they need? And actually solve the underlying issue and talk it through, you can solve it. That doesn't account for the psychopaths of the world, because there are, those that they're not going to care. They just want to watch it burn. Back to Batman and the Joker, which Batman is the hero that Tuesday School deserves. Which is, throw it out there.
Nice. Yes, it is.
They actually say if you encounter a psychopath trying to kill you, you should actually talk to him. To something that might trigger something to make you stop.
Okay, well, so maybe it works for them too.
But I don't know if I'm gonna. I don't know. You don't know what you're gonna do until you're actually in the situation. Actually,
I can tell you from personal experience. I had a guy threaten to kill me, come down off of his porch while campaigning, and because I'm an evil Democrat, or I was at the time, and he was not. And he probably has some mental health issues on top of that. But between me and this guy, who he was like cocked ready to swing, a woman got between us and started talking, and he ended up hitting nobody and turning and walking away. And there was no violence. Well, there was, there was some violence, but it could have been a lot more violent.
Yeah, so my follow-up would be, let's say there was a swing and you did get hit, right? Maybe, it's great if we just say, let's talk and we can talk them down, fantastic. But maybe you talk and it doesn't work. Are you still willing to talk?
Right.
Like, are you still willing to take the hit, or 2 or 6 or 20?
No.
Still not return violence? At what point? And then of course there's, in the question of ethical violence, right? There's all these questions of what is the definition of violence? If I push somebody out of the way to save them, I've done a violent act to them, but it wasn't intentionally to harm them. It was to help them. What if I push the bad guy who's trying to hurt my wife or my children? That's a violent act, but it's not the same violent act. So we have those questions of what does it mean to be violent too.
The definition of violent is with intent to hurt. So I don't know if you can say if there's truly no malice intent, then is it violence at all?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so you're talking about saving
The
somebody.
Webster Dictionary, whatever it is, says that violence is with an intent to.
All right, but what if I push the bad guy out of the way? My intent was to harm him so that he would not harm anyone else. I was doing the least amount of violence I could think of. I mean, punching them would be worse, shooting them would be worse, but I'm still pushing them, hopefully causing them to, I don't know, rethink their way of thinking. I would think it would still be a violent act, but whatever your level is, I'm just saying, at what point do you say, I can't do that anymore? Because Jesus would not return violence.
Well,
I mean, so I
we're
can
not
counter
Jesus.
argument. And
We're
then the
not
counter,
Jesus, like that's a standard. I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, the counter argument is Jesus is fulfilling his mission at a specific, role to play, and that's not my role, and
Right.
therefore not apply to me. He was sent to be the sacrifice, and that's not our role. That's the counter argument. The other side, right?
I don't think so. I mean, it's not.
Isn't the entire point of
not a good
everything
one.
is to act like Jesus?
What was that, Dad?
Isn't the entire point of everything is to act like Jesus? Like, isn't that the main goal of Christians everywhere?
Yeah. Little Christ. Yeah. And he does say, take up your cross and follow me. And, if somebody hits you, what are you supposed to do? Someone hits you in the right cheek, you're supposed to turn to the other cheek as well. Right? And not only are you supposed to not hurt your enemies, you're supposed to pray for those who persecute you. But I can't even imagine somebody having kidnapped my child and me praying for that person. That seems ludicrous. I mean, I'd be praying for him, but it'd be some imprecatory psalms. Right? It'd be those psalms where you're cursing them. Dear God, rip the teeth out of their mouth. David prays some of those kinds of prayers. But I can't see Christians. I can't see myself retaliating if I'm trying to follow Jesus. I don't know where that leaves me as a good soldier or as a good father or husband. Because I would never believe a husband would not protect his wife. I can't even fathom that. My mind cannot wrap itself around such an idea.
So I have two questions. One is a silly one, and one is a more serious one. Let's say World War III starts tomorrow and you're included in the draft.
Yeah.
What would you do in that situation? Where it's not like atomic, whatever it would be if World War III actually started, it would be a bunch of atomic bombs. But if it was like trench warfare, like World War II type things, and you're handed a gun and said, go with these 10,000 people and start killing, Chinese or Soviets or whoever they are.
Yeah, I don't think that's that silly of a question. If that was your silly one.
No, that was a serious
Oh, that was a serious one. Yeah, that's that one. I don't know. I'm not sure that I could fight in a war at this point in my theology. No matter how just the war is, no matter how good it is, I don't think I could take someone's life anymore. But that goes against the vast majority of my life and everything I've been taught and have thought about and still think about and watch on TV and cheer for when they do the things that I won't do.
Travis, you probably know this. What happens if you refuse?
Well, they could choose to arrest you. Well, it's breaking the law. So if you're within the boundaries of the United States of America, you'll be arrested and charged and convicted, most likely, which is why you go to Canada, eh? So.
Yeah. And what have we been taught, right? That's what the cowards did in Vietnam or whatever. This whole narrative, if you're not willing to do that, then you're a coward.
There's also an exception to the draft, I believe, where you can, or there have been at different times, you can agree to do service here instead of going, I don't know how it works, but, and I don't know if it's all the time thing at certain times. But you can agree to work not in combat, but still serve.
Or just be Hacksaw Ridge? whatever that guy's name is.
Hacksaw Ridge, yeah, Garfield.
I haven't seen it.
All right, what was your silly one? We'll let you have the last word.
Would Jesus play paintball?
Would Jesus play paintball? Huh. Well, that wouldn't be violence, right? Because
It is, yeah.
Is it?
according to your definition, it's not intended to harm.
Are you sure?
You intentionally inflict pain. You know you're causing pain.
You're knowing, like, you know that you're gonna hurt the person.
Yes, but for good reasons, right?
Well, that's a different thing.
Okay, would Jesus wrestle or box?
I mean, he wrestled with Jacob.
Yeah.
If you believe the story.
Yeah, those are great questions. I don't know the answers to those.
Would Jesus have a snowball fight? Anything like that, really?
Yeah, he'd have a snowball fight. I can answer that one. That'll be fine. I think he'd paintball. Would he box? I don't know. Like, yeah, you're on this continuum, right? Where does it become wrong depending on who you are? You know, it's okay to shoot somebody as long as you don't kill them. You know, it's okay to. It just keeps going up. I don't know the answer to these things. But I know you don't cut off people's ears with swords. And I know that vengeance is not ours, thus says the Lord. We're supposed to leave that to him. So glad I could help everyone. All right, nice talking to you guys. And we will close this baby down.
Well, I mean, so like, what do the conservative Christian people say is the counterpoint? I mean, I'm sure there's a counterpoint from, I don't know, Gospel Coalition or somebody like that, right? Who's the counterpoint about like no violence is okay? Or is there not a counterpoint?
Oh no, there's definitely. I mean, I would say the vast majority of Christians, especially evangelical Christians, would hold to some sort of violence. They would.
Yeah, I mean, like what's Billy Graham Jr. say, or whoever the guy is, you know?
Oh, he says God wants us to crush our enemies. Look at the Old Testament; it's filled with it.
Right. So there you go. So they just talk about the God of the Old Testament.
Yeah, well, or they go to Revelation,
Oh yeah, no.
and it looks like Jesus is violent in Revelation, but we've decided that we're going to do Revelation here at some point, so I can show you that's not at all what's happening.
Jesus is not Thanos, and kill a third of the population.
No.
So if God said David was a man after his own heart, but David also ordered Bathsheba's husband to die. I'm not saying he wants us to go kill people, but when you look at the entire Bible, I don't think that you're not supposed to defend yourself, even though that's not a situation of defense. I think you have to look at it a little deeper. I don't think we're supposed to just lay there and let somebody kill us. I'm not believing that.
Even though Jesus did. Exactly.
That's God. I don't know, Look at David and how he was used throughout the Bible.
Yeah, but David was, I mean, can we just be honest? David was really not a good guy.
That's my whole point. That's precisely the point.
Yeah, so when it says that he was a man after God's own heart, that doesn't mean that he did everything right.
I'm not saying he did everything right, but God still gave provisions to David. That is what I'm trying to say.
He still blessed Jacob when he lied and deceived his father.
Right.
I'm not saying people should go around killing people. That's not what I'm saying. But,
I think
their
God
redemption
uses these people despite their sin.
Right.
And if we look through the Old Testament and we see that it progresses into the New Testament, that's the problem, is we grab hold of Old Testament things where God does things. I mean, good grief, he floods the whole world. But we don't see that progression, that movement, and to see where it culminates, which is, I think, with, turn the other cheek and pray for those who persecute you.
Well, like Jesus deliberately stops in multiple quotes from scripture before the vengeance part. Like the most obvious one from what is Isaiah, right? He's reading and like the next thing everybody knows, they know the story is revenge, and Jesus just stops like that. That part, yeah, no, that got written in there, but that wasn't for me. See you later. This stops right here.
No, that's an amazing passage. Yeah. Like mid-sentence, Jesus stops the quote. before he ends up with the vengeance of the day of the Lord. Yeah. So, and Jesus is supposed to be our clarification, right? He's supposed to clarify what we were supposed to understand all along that we didn't get. I mean, this asks all kinds of questions of how do we treat the Old Testament, but that's a hermeneutics class. We've been doing that in Genesis and Exodus in the past. Like, what should we think of it? We don't just get rid of it, but it's leading us somewhere. It's a Christotelic approach. This is the goal.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should go around shooting and killing people. I'm not saying that at all. I just want to make that clarification.
We're glad that you
Or
clarified.
that you should be like David. I'm just saying the redemption is still there in certain cases. And in general, I'm going to be quiet now.
We're glad you clarified that because everyone here thought you were saying that we should.
That's not what I was
go to a certain
saying.
page. So good thing you fixed
No,
that.
that's not what I was saying.
I know, of course you weren't. This is the safe place. We can even say that if you wanted to.
No.
All right, I'm gonna end this with our final 6 here. Thanks for you guys coming. At least invite friends for next time. I think David Wallstead is going to come next week and talk about church and like a new paradigm for how you do church, because this is what we talk about here a lot. So I think that would be super cool, and he's doing it. So I asked him to come and help us think through that kind of stuff. So.
Who is
Right.